All right, welcome everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Terry Lucas and I'm the director of the Shelter Island Public Library. This is our first Friday night dialogue in honor of Carol Galligan. Carol Galligan was a big supporter of our library and one of our favorite patrons. She was a professor, an author, an avid gardener. She loved baseball and she was very, very proud of her Irish heritage. And we want to thank the Banyan Tree Roots Foundation for funding this series of programs in Carol's honor. And with that, I'm turning it over to Jocelyn.
Thank you, Terry, and welcome everyone. And just a little housekeeping, if you would stay muted while the performance is going on, but I believe Jim Hawkins is going to be having an interchange, and then you can unmute yourselves. And I just want to thank Jim Hawkins for being here. He was at the library in 2017, so it's been a while and we missed having you, and we're glad you're back, and even on Zoom. So with that, thank you very much, and I'll send it over to Jim.
Oh, Jocelyn, thank you very much. And Terry, thank you for your welcome. And I'm delighted to be with you. All of you, thank you so very much for coming in. Hopefully, next time we all get our shots and the weather starts to warm up, and hopefully we'll be able to be together when we do one of these. And to start you off, okay, a story called The Looking Glass by one of Ireland's great storytellers. I think one of the great storytellers of all time. His name was Eamon Kelly. He was from County Kerry. But the looking glass, an old-fashioned word for a mirror, as I'm sure you all know. It's always been a source of amusement to me how we all got along before the looking glass was invented. Should we spend enough time in front of it, don't we? But anyway, the looking glass was invented as a fellow living way out in the west of Ireland in Connemara, who was unaware of the fact. And one day there was an excursion going up to the big city of Dublin, and because he had never been there and the excursion was on the inexpensive side, he decided to go. Well, the day of his trip, it was a beautiful day, and he looked at the beauties of the Irish countryside as he went across it. When he got up to Dublin and he got off the bus, he didn't particularly care what direction he went. He just started to walk, and he was twisting and turning and looking at all of these buildings around him, the size of them. Up until that point, the tallest building he had ever seen was a two-story schoolhouse that he had gone to. After a while, he came around one corner, and there was the largest shop he had ever seen in his life. And over it, it said Woolworths. Nowadays, it might be Walgreens or CVS. And he looks at it and he thinks to himself, well, now what in the name of God could be in a place like this? Well, he goes into the shop, and he's walking down the aisles and he's seeing all of these things, many of which he had never seen before, all of these gadgets that were being sold. Came around one corner, and there on one table were these little oblongs, no bigger than a matchbox. And the sun was shining in on such a direction as to brought his attention to them. When he looked around, nobody was paying too much attention to him. Went over and picked up one of the little oblongs and brought it up in front of his face. And as he looked, the amazement grew. A picture of my father. What are they doing with a picture of my father up here in Dublin? Well, he went over to the girl at the counter. He asked her how much it was. She told him, and she started to wrap it for him. And he said to her, do you know where they got those things? I'm not sure, says she. They might have come from London. London, says he. My father was never in London. although he might have stopped there on his way up to heaven. Well, she wrapped up the little oblong object, he paid for it, put it in his pocket, and he continued his trip throughout Dublin. And every chance he got out, he took out the little object, looked at what he thought was a picture of his father. Well, his wonderful day in Dublin was finally over, and he went back home. And of course, he wouldn't let anyone see the little oblong object, particularly the wife. She never had the respect for the father-in-law that he had. But she was a very patient woman, and she was dying to find out what was he hiding in the pocket. Well, one day her patience paid off because the neighbor's chimney went on fire, and the husband went out the door, leaving the coat on the chair. Well, no sooner was he out the door, but she dove into the jacket, pulled out the little oblong object, unwrapped it, and brought it up in front of her own face. And as she looked, the amazement grew. And who's this owl hairpin? And she's no great shakes. And if this what taking him up to the big city of Dublin, I'll soon put an end to his gallop. Wrapped up the little oblong object, put it back into the coat, and prepared herself for battle. And don't we all know what we're like when we're in that frame of mind? Well, the husband came back from helping the neighbors. No sooner was he in the door, but she approached him. Who's that picture of that old dolly bar that you have in your pocket? That's no picture of any woman. That's a picture of my father that I found up in Dublin. With hair curlers and a blouse on, I'll soon put an end to this. Put on her own coat, went down to the presbytery to see Father John. Well, when Father John heard the news, couldn't believe his ears. Knew the man all of his life, knew him to be a kind, pious, God-fearing man. Oh, he has us fooled up to the ball of our eyes, Father, said the wife. And what's worse, he has that picture of that strange woman in his pocket. Oh, that wouldn't do, said Father John. If that news got out, there'd be terrible scandal among the parishioners. I'd better get down and talk to him. Put on his own coat and went down to the house. Walked in the door and looked at the husband and said, now, my good man, an end to this. Hand out that picture of that strange woman that you have in your pocket. That's no picture of any woman, Father. That's a picture of my father that I found up in Dublin. Hand it out, said the priest. Well, reluctantly, the husband took the little oblong out, gave it to the priest. The good father unwrapped it and brought it up in front of his own face. And as he looked, the amazement grew. And then he started to laugh. The two of you are mad. You should have your heads examined. Isn't this the parish priest that was here before myself? Sinead Shigale, thank you very much. Thank you. Will you come to the bower or the free boundless ocean, where the stupendous waves roll in thunder and motion, where the mermaids are seen and the fierce tempest gathered, to love there in the green, to the dear land of our fathers. Will you come? Will you come to the bower? Will you come to the land of O'Neill and O'Donnell, of Lord Lucan of old, and the immortal O'Connell, when Cimbrian drove the Danes, and St. Patrick the vermin, and whose valleys remain Still most beautiful and charming, will you come? Will you come to the bower? You can see Dublin city and the fine groves of Blarney, the Banboyne, the Liffey, and the lakes of Killarney. You can ride on the tide or the broad majestic Shannon. You can sail round Loch Ness and see story Dungannon. Will you come? Will you come to the bower? You can visit New Ross, Gallant Wexford and Tory, where the green was last seen by proud Saxon and Tory. And the air will resound with hosannas to greet you. On the shores will be found gallant Irish men and women to greet you. Will you come? Will you come to the bower? Will you come and wake our lost land from her slumber? And her chains we will break, links that long are encumbered, and the air will resound with hosannas to greet you. On the shores will be found gallant Irish men and women to greet you. Will you come? Will you come to the bower? Sinead. Goramilio Mahagat. Agus tá fáilte rómh, agus an lá fádaraigh Hanadív. And you're probably sitting there saying, what in the name of God is he saying to us? Well, because I'm a teller of Irish stories and a singer of Irish songs, I think it's very, very important to include the language as part of my performances. And the Irish language, as all languages, a wonderful language. I love language. I mean, I only speak English and I'm learning Irish, but I'm always fascinated by language. If I'm out someplace and I hear somebody speaking a foreign language, I'll try and stop and listen. And the Irish language, as I said, it's a wonderful language and absolutely amazing language, considering how it has survived over the thousands of years, particularly our neighbors across the Irish Channel have tried to eradicate it for many, many hundreds, and up to this day still do not respect it as a legitimate language. But anyhow, it's a wonderful language. So as I go along, if phrases or words come up, I'll translate them to you. Now, what I just said to you, the Irish language is very interesting. We know in English it's always subject, verb, object most of the time. That's not the case in the Irish language. Many times they'll start with the verb and then they may come in with the subject, the object, or the object of the subject. So when I said to you, ta fáilte romh, what I was saying was the welcome upon you. And then when I said to you, Goramilio Mahagut, the thanks 1,000 times to you. And the third one, now you have to listen very carefully because there's a quiz about this at the end of the program. If you want to say Happy St. Patrick's Day in the Irish language, okay, I'll go through one. Law is day. Fodrick is of Patrick. Hannah, happiness. And of course, the Irish language has singular and plural. So if I was saying to one person, if I was saying to Jocelyn, I would say dit. If I'm saying it to all of you listening in, I would say Div. So Law Fadric Hana Div. Day of Patrick, happiness to you. Sounds like an awful lot easier just to say St. Patrick's Day, doesn't it? But that's the way the Irish language works. You want to try it once with me? Law, Fadric, Hannah, Div. Day of Patrick, happiness. And if you want to impress your friends this St. Patrick's Day, you can go up to them. And, you know, the wonderful thing about a lot of languages is the same about the Irish. After a while, if you use it, flows off your tongue very smoothly. So after a while, you can say, La Fadric Hanadiv. Happy St. Patrick's Day to you. But anyhow, as I said, as I go along, if Irish phrases and words come in, I'll use them. I always start many of my programs with that particular story and that particular song to tell you a little bit about the song. The song is called "Come to the Bower," and it's a song that goes back quite a long way, maybe even into the 1800s in the Irish tradition. And now it's getting a revival. Some of the younger groups are. I'm sure you all know a bower is a place where if you're trying to grow something, you take care of it and cultivate it, and so and whatever you're trying to sow will come alive and will do well. If you don't, obviously the brambles come in and kills whatever you're trying to go there. That symbol came into Irish literature in the 19th century. And of course, after the famine period, there was a tremendous amount of revolutions, small revolutions trying to overcome English rule. And that symbol came into the literature in the sense of a bower being Ireland and this place that should be protected. Now, I love the song. It does make reference to Irish struggles, but we're not getting into any politics tonight. We want to be here and have some fun. But the truth is, you can't mention Ireland without it being political. We are a people who have fought the oppressor for thousands of years. The main one, as I said, is across the Irish Channel. But the other part is that if you listen to it very closely, it mentions so many of the places that you can go to in Ireland. How many of you have been to Ireland? Just so if you raise your hand, how many of you have been to Ireland? That's right, Joe, you did. Good for you. Joe, I bet you had a good time too, didn't you? Yes, and I'm sure you want to go back. I would say those of you who have never been there to get the chance, by all means go. It's an amazing country for such a small country. It's only about the size of Indiana. It's about 360 miles in width and about 240 in 360 in length and 240 in width, and an amazing tradition. You go, whatever your interests are, whether it's literary, you want to go some great tourist places, if you have an interest in flower, fauna, whatever it is, Ireland has it. And as I said, the people are wonderful. They're very friendly. You can go into a pub or restaurant anywhere and everybody will talk to you. So I like the song for that reason, because it mentions so many of those places. And I always mention to people, if you've never been to Ireland, the first time go, it's good to take a tour. I say that, first of all, they drive on the other side of the road. That takes getting used to. But they have some wonderful tour companies. You can Google, you can find them, and great accommodations, take you to good restaurants. And the real good ones usually have storytellers as their guides. and they will bring you, to programs at night, music programs, and so forth. So I would say to you, if you haven't been there, you can, good for you, and do, take a tour. And then the second time you go, you know the country more and you're used to it, then you might, rent a car and so forth to get around. So just very quickly, in relation to this story, just a few, and I'll get into my own list, but a few biographical things about myself. First of all, I always tell people, I am a proud native-born New Yorker, Astoria, Queens. Anybody out there, Astoria, Queens, Jackson Heights, all of those great neighborhoods, that's where I grew up, that's where I was born. Both of my parents, though, were native Irish. My father was from the west of Ireland, a place called Ornmore in County Galway, and my mother was from a place, what they call the Midlands, County Westmeath, about 50 miles southwest of Dublin. They met in this country in the 1930s. In the 1930s, so many Irish and other cultures came here, and there were Irish dance halls all over New York City. And it's a kind of a funny story how my parents met. My mother was dating my father's best friend, Mike O'Leary from County Cork. Mike got inducted into the army during the Second World War. The last thing he said to my father before he left for the army, he said, "Tom, take good care of Mary for me." Well, he did. They were married in 44. I was born in 46. And in 1947, fulfilling a long-awaited dream, my dad had a passionate love for his own country. We went back to Ireland, built a house where my mom was from, stayed 10 years, and then economically times got tough, and we came back to the United States. And I'll tell you a little bit more of the story later on. The next story I'd like to tell you, okay, the Irish have, I know how many of you out there, if you like mythology, if you're a person who loves mythology, mythological stories, legendary stories, and if you've never read the Irish mythology, do yourself a treat. Absolutely amazing stories. Now, granted, some of them, there are battle stories which can be kind of violent, but there's so many other kinds of stories. In Irish, there are many cycles, but they're the two main cycles of Irish mythology. One is what they call the Kahalen Cycle. Many of the stories from the north of Ireland. To get an idea, Kahalen is very much like Zeus in Greek mythology. He's an enormous personage with all sorts of powers and abilities, but he has a very human element to him. He's got a terrible temper that he can't control. And then there's the stories of Finn McCool. Finn McCool is also a giant, but he does not have the fierceness, but he's still a powerful figure, but he is a much more humanistic figure. I'd like to tell you my favorite story from the Finn McCool collection. It's a story called The White Doe, or sometimes it's also called Finn McCool's Wife. One day, Finn McCool went hunting. He took with him his two magic hounds, Brawn and Scalan. And he started off early in the morning, just as the last stars were fading and the mist hung over the mountains like the last strains of an old song. This was Finn's favorite place for hunting, the Hill of Allen, near his home in the County Kildare. And on this particular day, he had been hunting for several hours when suddenly what appeared before him was this beautiful white doe. And a feeling came over Finn that he had never experienced before. So he and the hound started to hunt the doe. And after a while, he noticed that the doe stayed distant enough that it couldn't be captured, but it didn't so far that it stayed within eyesight of Finn. Well, after a while, Finn thought to himself, I'll go back to my fortress. Let's see what this creature does. When he got to within the walls of his fortress, the White Doe was right behind him. And he called to Dal, his steward. He said, "Put this creature in with the other animals in the sheds. Maybe it will bring us some luck." Well, that night, Finn McCool slept very restlessly. And somewhere in the middle of the night, a searing white light came into his room. And through that light came the most beautiful woman Finn had ever seen in his life. "Who are you?" said Finn. "My name is Save," said she. "I am the White Doe you hunted in the woods today." "How is that possible?" "I am a princess of the She. Farduraka, the dark enchanter of my people, fell in love with me, but I didn't feel the same about him. And one day he was so angry, he struck me with his hazel staff and turned me into the White Doe that you saw today. Well, I thought my life was over. But then I had a friend among his servants who told me if I could gain entrance to the fortress of Finn McCool, I would get my human shape back and I would be safe and protected as well. So Finn McCool, I come to you seeking protection and shelter." Well, Finn was so taken with Save. He said, "Stay, stay, stay as long as you want." And in the days and the weeks and the months that followed, and they were in each other's company, they fell madly in love with each other. And they were married. And they thought that there could be no end to their happiness. But one day, the High King of Ireland called on Finn and his men, the Fianna, to come to the coast. It seemed there were marauders coming from the north that had to be dealt with. Well, Finn went to Save and he said, "Do not worry. I promise in 7 days I will return to you." And then he went to Dal, his steward, and he said, "Make sure my mistress does not go outside the fortress. She is with child. I am afraid something might happen to her." Well, as promised, Finn returned on the 7th day. But when he got to his fortress, his Save was not waiting for him. He looked everywhere. And then he called to Dal. He said, "Where is my wife?" And Dal, with his head hanging, said, "Master, on the 6th day, a man came across the meadow that looked exactly like you and had 2 hounds that looked like Bran and Scalan. And before I could stop my mistress, she rushed out into the meadow to meet you. But when she got closer, suddenly, that figure that looked like you turned into a dark, menacing figure and struck with the hazel staff and turned her into a White Doe. Well, the creature circled 3 times to try and get back within the fortress, but the hounds turned into demons and chased the White Doe off up into the hills. By the time I had gotten there, all had disappeared, leaving nothing but the sound of their echoing footsteps in the grass. Well, Finn now knew he had lost his Save, and he thought he might never see her again. And he went back into his fortress, and for days and weeks and months, he saw no one, he spoke with no one. But every spring, he went among the hills of Ireland searching for his beloved Save. And on the 6th spring, he was down in Benbulben in the county Sligo. It was a beautiful evening. The hounds had gone ahead of him, and he looked at the beauty of the countryside around him. And then he heard the hounds yelping. When he got to them, there between Bran and Scalan was this beautiful blonde-haired boy. And even the hounds seemed to be taken with him, for they licked his face. And Finn got that same feeling he got when he first saw the White Doe. He asked the boy his name. But the boy could not answer him. He had no language. And then Finn stretched out his hand to the boy, and at first he was reluctant, but then he took Finn's hand and he went with him. Well, Finn began to raise him up, and when he finally had acquired language, he asked the boy about his life in the forest. And the child said, I remember being taken care of by a beautiful white doe. She sheltered me and fed me. And in the wintertime, she slept beside me to keep me warm. But I also remember there was a dark, demanding figure that came on a regular basis and always angry. And one time he was so angry, he struck the white doe with his hazel staff and sent it off up into the mountains. I tried to follow, but some power held me in place. And the next thing I remember was that I was standing between Bron and Scalan. Well, Finn now knew this was his son. He also realized he would never see his beloved save again. He took the boy and he named him Oisin, which in the old Irish language means young fawn. And he raised him up to be a great poet, warrior, and storyteller. Sinead on Scale, thank you very much. Thank you. By the way, at the end, thank you very much. Many times you'll hear, you've heard me say after I finish a song, you'll hear me say Sinead. Sinead is just the phrase in the Irish language for that's it, there is no more. Or at the end of a song, at the end of a story, it says Sinead on Scale. That's the story. There is no more to it, and that's a tradition that still goes on in Irish storytelling circles. A wonderful story, obviously sad in many ways, but it does capture, I think, the spirit of the Irish mythological stories. And as I said, many of them can be. There's a very long poem called the Cattle Raid of Cooley, which goes on for oh God, I don't know, it's about 100 pages. And there's actually a tradition in Ireland that when the clans, the people that live together, the word they use in Ireland were clans. And it was a great honor to be able to tell to the king or the head of the clan. And so, as we know, there were 7 levels of storytellers that you had to go through before you could tell for the king. So there's a great tradition of it. Anyhow, to go in a totally different direction, I'd like to sing for you, I think, one of the more humorous songs in the Irish tradition. This is a song, I'm sure you've all heard of the great Tommy Macomb and the Clancy Brothers, a wonderful group that were responsible really for revival of Irish ballads in the 1960s in this country. They'd sort of been forgotten about, and so they revived it. And Tommy Macomb was with them, and Tommy was a wonderful singer, but he was also a brilliant storyteller. Not many people know that. One of my favorite Christmas albums, if you're looking for a Christmas album, it's called simply Tommy Macomb's Irish Christmas. It is just wonderful. Right from the get-go, he will, around Christmas time, he will take you literally back into the old times at Christmas time in Ireland, tell you some of the stories and sing you some of the songs and tell you about the custom. Absolutely, just wonderful. He just a wonderful talent. But anyhow, there's a song called The Liar. And there's a tradition of it, not just in Ireland. I believe it goes back into the 1800s, the British Isles, even in this country, what people would do was they would take actual historical events and they would rewrite them in a poetic form or a song form, except that they would try to put a humorous bent on the events. So this is Tommy's version of The Liar. And afterwards, I'll tell you the story. I don't know how true it is. Supposedly, his motivation for writing this song. I was born about 10,000 years ago in Belmullet in the county of Mayo. It was me that chased the vermin when St. Patrick preached his sermon, and I'll whoop the man that says it isn't so. With me rightful to a laddie, to a lee. There is no one who can tell a lie like me. You can search until you tire. You won't find a bigger liar. I've been lying since the dawn of the history. I saw Eve go picking apples off a tree. She came over and she offered one to me. Well, I turned and said, there, madam, you can try your luck with Adam. I'm going home to have some fish and chips and tea. I saw Delilah cutting Samson's hair. Well, she cut away until his head was bare. When he didn't run away, well, she married him next day. And they opened up a barber shop in Clare. With me rightful to a laddie, to a lee. There is no one who can tell a lie like me. You can search until you tire, you won't find a bigger liar. Have been lying since the dawn of this story. With King Billy at the Boyne, I heard him call on his followers to follow till they fall. Then he said, we'll win quite easily and we'll canonize young Paisley. And he up and sang a verse of Derry's Wall. It was during World War II I met them all. There was Roosevelt, Churchill, and de Gaulle. And one day I nearly fainted. I was having my house painted. There was Hitler hanging paper in the hall. With me full to a laddie, to a lee. There is no one who can tell a lie like me. Search until you tire, you won't find a bigger liar. Have been lying since the dawn of his story. You can search until you tire, you won't find a bigger liar. I've been lying since the dawn of his story. Ho! Thank you very much. Got Amelia Mahagut. Just wanted to mention you've probably seen one. This is what is an Irish drum. It's called a bowron in the Irish language, spelled B-O-D-H-R-A-N, but it's pronounced like bow, like you take a bow and run. And it's an instrument that goes back well over 4 centuries in Irish history. And supposedly, from what we know, period in Ireland before Patrick came along, well, even when Patrick was still there, people, they had clans. They had different clans in Ireland, and many times they warred against each other, whatever the disputes were and so forth. So many times there might be infighting among their own clan, or they might be fighting another clan, and if there was an enemy coming, they'd all unite and fight the enemy. But anyway, supposedly whenever they went into battle, they went in with a piper, and you've seen the war pipes in St. Patrick's Day, and many times somebody playing a version of this. It's a wonderful instrument. As you can probably see, it's a round piece of wood, right? And you see the 2 sticks in the middle. because wood and skin are affected by heat. That keeps the shape of it. And of course, then it's usually a goat skin or a sheep skin that's put around the boweron itself. And you can see, you can put all sorts of decorative nails on it. And it's a marvelous instrument. And I always say that I'm not trying to be humble. I've been fooling around with it for over 30 years, and I'm still a beginner. In fact, actually, I need a good boweron instructor because I've gotten into some bad habits with it. Anyway, it's played, you see, with this piece of wood. It's a stick. Usually come different sizes, different shapes, and they're called tippers because you literally tip the boweron with the stick, whether you're going down or up. So it's called a tipper, and very interesting with this. If I don't put my hands on the back and I play it, it's pretty loud. But if I put my hand on it and I mute it, so depending on where you put your hand on it, how much you press the skin, what you can get all sorts of sounds out of it. So it's an amazing, absolutely amazing instrument, and a very important part of a traditional Irish band, and has gotten a tremendous revival of interest, I'd say, in the last 15 or 20 years. So. Usually, this is a part of the program where many times what I do is I'll just I stop, and I'm always curious about my audience. I'm always curious about your Irish connections. So, is there anybody out there who's native Irish, who was born in Ireland? Nobody who was born in Ireland. Do some of you know your Irish connections? I know, Joe, you mentioned to me before that your family, some of your family come from Cork and Kerry. Am I right?
Cork, Kerry, Tipperary, and Galway. The four
Right.
grandparents.
Yeah. My dad was from Galway, and one of the great characters of my life. In fact, I'm writing a story about him. My uncle Morris lived in Clonmel and Tipperary. And you said you've been there before, right? You've been over.
Yes. Have you ever heard of the Devil's Bit?
The Devil's what?
The Devil's Bit, as in bite. The Devil's Bite. The Devil's Bit.
God, I haven't, Joe.
My grandfather, my maternal grandfather's last name was Gleason. He was from Tipperary,
right?
And he always said he was a Big Jim from the Devil's Bit. He was born in Ireland, came over when he was about 20 years old. My mother said his brogue was thicker on the day he died than when he got off the boat.
Oh, right.
And he said he was Big Jim from the Devil's Bit. And when we went to Ireland, we went over to I forget the name of the town. Templemore.
Oh yeah, I know Templemore.
There was a reunion going on, and we were invited. And on the way over, we passed the signs pointing to the mountains, the hills, and then we saw a sign that said "Devil's Bit" with an arrow. We pulled the car off to the side of the road, right. And we looked out probably 5, 8, 9 miles. And there was a series of hills. I don't want to say they weren't mountains like more like the Catskills than the Rockies.
Right.
And but there was one mountain where it looked like someone had taken a big bite out of it.
Oh.
And that was the Devil's Bit.
Oh, no kidding.
The whole legend about this. And
I never heard of that.
Yeah, and it was just great from the standpoint of knowing that one's grandfather was involved in it, and
right.
It was part of the history in the family, and right. It was great to be able to see it.
Right. No, it's interesting because my Uncle Morris and my dad's sister Delia lived in Clonmel in Tipperary, and we used to go over there regularly. And there was a huge monastery up the mountain. It's called the Knockmeal Down Mountains. And there was a monastery up there that was built purely by the monks with stone. And the thing I always remember, there was something about whatever it was, when you're coming down, there was something about the wind patterns. You remember people who talk about the Bermuda Triangle when ships visit. Well, I remember as a kid, we'd be coming down and my Uncle Morris gave me a stone and he said, see if you can throw the stone over the lake. Well, I threw the stone and I don't know how far, all of a sudden, shoo, went right down into the water. So whatever the pattern of the winds were or so forth, was,
What have you been drinking? That's the blarney.
well, I wasn't drinking then. I was a young lad, so I knew what was going on.
I
So,
sail in West Neck Harbor during the summer, and I tell you, I know a little bit about the wind because I do a lot of sailing.
right. Well, so right.
That story is all blarney, but I appreciate it.
Right. And so the rest, any family connections that you know of in relation to Ireland? Anybody, any connections?
Feel free to unmute yourself if you have a story to tell.
I'm sorry, say that, Terry?
Feel free to unmute yourself if you have a story to tell.
Oh, okay. Yeah, absolutely. If you're out there and you want to, tell us something or something, don't be shy. Just as I said, over the years, I've dealing with audiences, I've learned a lot of things. I mean, like Joe told me about it. I never heard of that, and I do know that part of the country. I wouldn't say I know it greatly, but I know it fairly well. But over the years, my audiences have really taught me a lot of things and told me about places. And I've been pretty much all over Ireland, including the north, but at many times, little places. Yeah.
I have a cute story to tell. We went with a good friend of mine, a kid I went to grammar school with. And Betsy and I planned the trip to Ireland.
Right.
And all he said to us was, we got to make a stop at Kenmare. I don't care where it is, but we got to stop at Kenmare.
In Kenmare, right.
Kenmare.
Right.
So we set up to make a stop in Kenmare. And we stop at a little B&B. And the reason he wanted it to be at Kenmare was that his older brother had gone to, had done some research about the family. And they came from Kenmare, a parish called Two Assist.
Mm-hmm.
And the town of Kenmare is made up of maybe 75 little parishes.
Mm-hmm.
And we go in after
Register.
going up. We register. We come down.
He goes and asks.
He's already ahead of us, and he says, "Does anybody know Timothy O'Shea?" And the guy says, "Yeah, I delivered a cow with him this morning." And Timothy O'Shea was the only relative that he knew he was related to in Kenmare.
There you go.
So we go. He offers to take us up to the farm,
Right.
which he owns, this Timothy O'Shea. So we go up, all of us, because I'm not driving out of that the roads in the West, forget about it.
Well,
I mean, you take your life in your hands.
yeah, you better know what you're doing. Mhm.
So I said, yeah, we'll go with you. I'm not driving. I'm not leaving this place until we actually leave. It's staying down here. So we go over to a farm. It turns out Timothy spent 30 years in the Bronx as a bus driver.
Oh, there you go.
And Kevin, my friend, has an aunt who still lives in Rockland County.
Yeah.
He retired from Mapstoa, bought a farm back in the old homestead, and he's working it, you know.
And we called the aunt.
And we called the aunt from Ireland to talk to him, who had lived 40 miles from her in the States and never knew it,
Yeah.
you know. But it struck us because we made the plans. We didn't know that you know, he would know anybody there. But I said to him, my remark as we came in to the town, and he looked. I looked over to where the mountains were. I said, "Your family must have been smugglers." You know, because the Kenmare River runs into it. It's an estuary, but it comes in and it's back there. But we got to laugh out of that.
Yeah. Well, and the great thing about the people in Ireland, and just from my own experience being over there in the 70s, 80s, is that many times if you stop, ask them for directions about something, you know, they'll start to give you directions and just say, "How the hell with it? I'll get in the car and I'll take you there myself."
Right.
And they will. They'll do that. You know, they'll do that. So, you know.
Right. But the interesting thing is in Ireland, they're O'Shea's. In America, they're Shays.
They're Shays, yeah. Yeah, some kid, that happened with some of the names. The O's and the Macs were dropped, you know. But Shay and O'Shea, very big carry name, and particularly in Irish athletics, in the game of football. O'Shea and O'Shea are some of the big names in the history of Irish football. So, you know. Any others before we continue on? Okay. The Irish also, they love recitations. And recitations, basically stories, songs, or story poems, all right? And I'd like to tell you this one. Now, this is, okay. I explained, if Diane was here, I've taught for 39 years, right? And you put me in the classroom and you put me in front of an audience, I'm pretty good. I can handle myself fairly well. You put a hammer in my hand, I am a dangerous person. And it's not because I mean to be. I am truly, if you were looking for a stereotypical klutz, right here. I mean, we own our own house. I learned to, you know, to do the small stuff, but when it's a big job, you save the money and you get a pro. But anyhow, a friend of mine sent me this book of recitations, and when I read it, I said, this sounds like something I might do. And it's called The Sick Note sometimes, and it's also called Why Paddy's Not at Work Today. Dear boss, I write this note to you to tell you of my plight. And at the time of writing, I am not a pretty sight. My body is all black and blue, my head's a deathly gray. And I hope you'll understand why Paddy's not at work today. I was working on the 14th floor, some bricks I had to clear, but throwing them down from such a height, it was not a good idea. The boss, he wasn't very pleased, he being an awful sod, and he said I'd have to take them down the ladder in my hod. Now clearing all these bricks by hand, it was so awfully slow. So I hoisted up a barrel and secured a rope below. But in my haste to do the job, I was too blind to see that a barrel full of building bricks was heavier than me. So I went down and cut the rope, and the barrel fell like lead. And clinging tightly to the rope, I started up instead. I shot up like a rocket, and to my surprise I found that halfway up I met the bloody barrel coming down. Now the barrel struck my shoulder as to the floor it did sped. And when I hit the top, I struck the pulley with my head. I still hold on, no numbed and shocked from this almighty blow. When the barrel emptied out half its bricks, 14 floors below. Now when these bricks had fallen from the barrel to the floor, I then outwed the barrel and I started down once more. Then tightly to the rope I headed for the ground. And I fell among the building bricks that were scattered all around. As I lay moaning on the floor, I thought I passed the worst. When the barrel struck the pulley, and then the bottom burst. A shower of bricks came down on me. I had to give up hope. But as I was losing consciousness, I let go the bloody rope. The barrel then being heavier, it started down once more. And it landed on my body as I lay there on the floor. It broke 3 ribs and my left arm, and I can only say that I hope you'll understand why Paddy's not at work today. Janae, yours to pass on to whoever you want. That's fantastic. Well, I said it's not an exaggeration to say I could see myself. I said truly a klutz. But anyway, again, as we're going along, if you have anything you want to ask about or comment, if you just put your hand up. I'm sure Tara will unmute you. Can't let the program go without telling you a story about St. Patrick, right? And I'm sure, of course, today coming up March 17th. First of all, how many of you know something about St. Patrick? What have you heard over the years? Anything that sticks out to you that you've heard in relation to St. Patrick? Couple of things I will tell you. You probably heard this say that St. Patrick chased the snakes out of Ireland.
Yes.
Not true. There are no snakes in Ireland. And if you think about it, why probably are there no snakes in Ireland?
Because he chased them out.
No, if you think about it, Ireland is a pretty damp, wet climate an awful lot of the time. Snakes usually like warm climates, right? Suppose, and I've done research on this, the closest thing they come to a snake in Ireland, unless of course somebody has brought one in, is that there's a long little, it's almost like a very long worm, all right? That's the closest they come. The reason the snake shows up in Patrick is because I think it's related to obviously the story of Adam and Eve. So of course the devil appears in the form of a snake. So when I think Patrick was teaching about, warning about evil and so forth, he probably used the snake. But they always have that picture of him chasing, or maybe he was symbolically chasing the evil out of the country. The other thing that is probably true about him, there are shamrocks in Ireland, all right? And it's interesting, people have, had them sent over from Ireland and put them in water here. For some reason, whether it's connected to the water or whatever, they won't thrive here. There are 3 leaves instead of 4 leaves, but it's believed that St. Patrick used the shamrock to teach the Trinity. All right. The story of him is, and this is very interesting, there's always been a question about where was Patrick born? And different groups of people and countries have argued about where, who does he belong to? Of course, the Irish claim him, the English claim him, the Scots have claimed them, the Welsh have claimed them, the Italians have claimed them, some branches of the Spanish have claimed that he came from there. What from all of the research has been done, it looks like Patrick was either born in Italy, because his family was a wealthy family. His father was like a high class politician in Italy. And then at some point they moved to England. And now it's not clear as far as research is, well, was he born in Italy before his parents moved, or was he born when they got to England? And of course, it would be a tremendous irony if it wound up that Patrick was born in England. But anyhow, it's not quite sure. But the story is that the Irish clans raided the English countryside on a regular basis. They would plunder, steal, whatever. And many times they kidnap people. Well, Patrick's about 17 years old. He was kidnapped in one of these raids, brought back to Ireland, and put way up in the north of Ireland, a place called Slieve Nish, as a shepherd, taking care of sheep. And of course, the conditions were horrible. It was so cold, and he wasn't fed very well, and so forth. And as the story goes, in his sort of dreams or delusions, he prayed to God. He said, please, if you get me out of this, I will dedicate my life to you. And one night he heard a voice in his dream telling him to go to the sea or go to the ocean, that a ship would be there. So he does. He goes to the ocean, and the captain, suppose at first, was reluctant to take him on, but there was a certain feeling about him that the crew felt that he should take him on. Well, he finally got back to England. I mean, they went back through, I believe, through Italy and France, got back to England, and promising to God, he became a priest. But he had no intentions of going back to Ireland, right? And then what happened in his sleep, in his dreams, he would hear the people of Ireland calling out to him, Patrick, Patrick, you must come back to us. We need you, we need you. And so they made him a bishop. And in the year 432, he returned to Ireland. And of course, he met with the King of Ireland. At that time, it was King Lear. And of course, they didn't know quite to do with Patrick. This was a period in Ireland where the clans fought each other all the time. They all had weapons. And the story is, when they saw Patrick, when he came to Turkey, Patrick never carried weapons. They didn't know, well, we can't kill him because he doesn't have a weapon. So then they started to listen to him. And Lear gave him permission to, says, you want to try and convert the country? And of course, Ireland was a pagan country then. You go right ahead. And then he started his ministry. Now, there's a wonderful storyteller by the name of Eddie Lenahan. If you want to Google his stories, he's from a place called Crusheen, County Clare. He is an absolute brilliant storyteller. As I describe him, he is a walking encyclopedia of Irish myth, legend, story. He is just amazing. He is so good that every summer in Ireland, they set him up in a place and they bring the tourists to hear him tell. A while back, he wrote a series of stories about St. Patrick called St. Patrick Was a Gentleman. And Eddie and I get in contact once or twice a year. We write to each other. And he's been very kind enough to allow me to tell his stories. So I would like to tell you my favorite St. Patrick story in that collection. And it's called St. Patrick and the Strange Curse. Now, St. Patrick was a very unpredictable man. I should mention to you, Eddie wrote these stories with a sense of humor, and you'll hear it in here. Now, St. Patrick was a very unpredictable man. And could you blame him? The kind of people he had to deal with when he was trying to convert Ireland. Well, this one time he was down in the County Tipperary, down in the Cashel area. It was November and it was damp and cold and rainy, and he was looking for a place for himself and his followers to stay for the night. And because he was in Cashel Nari, Cashel of the King, he thought he would meet a higher class of people. So he saw this very nice looking house and went up and he knocked at the door. The man came out and opened it. Patrick introduced himself and told him what he was looking for. And the man started to laugh at him. What do you think? You think we're running a hotel around here for the likes of you and your followers? You see that whitethorn bush over there? There's plenty of room for you and your followers. You'll be comfortable for the night. Well, obviously, Patrick, not happy with this response. And his followers were shivering in glee to see how Patrick was going to put this ignorant buttock in his place. But Patrick didn't do that. He smiled his gentle smile, and he put his hand over the man's head, and he said, "May your house be the highest. May your cattle be the whitest. And may you marry the fairest lady in the community." Well, Patrick's followers, they just couldn't believe him. What's the matter with him? How can he say to this man who's insulted him and treated him so badly, "God, if this comes out, we'll be embarrassed altogether." But nobody said anything because it was Patrick. And that man, knowing who had blessed him, decided to take advantage of the blessing. He built a house way up, a very large house up at the top of the mountain. Bring attention to himself, of course. And then he went out and he bought a herd of the whitest cattle he could find, also to bring attention to himself. And as it turned out, he did marry one of the most beautiful women in the community. Well, in the meantime, Patrick continued his travels through Ireland, and about a week later, he was down in Kilkenny. And again, it was rainy and misty, and his followers were tired and complaining they wanted someplace to sleep. He knocked on another door. The man opened, and Patrick told him what he was looking for. And the man said to him, come in, Fálse. Fálse, the Irish word for welcome. Come in, you're as welcome as the flowers in May. This man couldn't do enough for Patrick and his followers. Wonderful food, fine wine, a bed for each one of them to sleep, and even made breakfast for them before they left the next morning. Patrick said to the man, "Money I have none, but I will give you my blessing if you would like." Well, Patrick's followers got down on their knees and they were so excited about how was Patrick going to reward this wonderful man. And the man himself got on his knees, and Patrick raised his hand over the man's head with a smile on his face, and he said, "May your house be the smallest. May your cattle be the darkest, and may you marry a woman who's no great picture."
Oh,
Well, Patrick's followers were beside themselves. Oh my God, what is the matter with him? How could he say this? This wonderful man who was treating him so well, and the man himself was on his knees and in tears. How could he do this? But nobody said anything. It was Patrick. Well, that man, he did marry a plain-looking woman, but she was very smart. She was very clever. And when the man proposed building a big house way up on top of the mountain, she said, no. I grew up in a small little house down here in the valley, and we were very comfortable. That's what we'll do. And then when the man proposed going out and buying a herd of white cattle, she said, no, no, no. Those are just for decoration. We're going to get the black pollies. They're best for the milking. And that's what they did. Well, Patrick then went back up to Tara in County Meath to rest himself from his journeys and conversions. And that winter, one of the worst storms that ever swept across Ireland and came off the ocean came. Well, the man who had built his house way up on top of the mountain, the wind swept the roof off the house and it almost collapsed. But the man who had built his house way down at the bottom of down the valley, the winds passed over and caused no damage at all. And as was common at that time, the O'Neill clan was known to raid into the community on a regular basis. Well, they had no problem finding the white pollies. But the black cows, they were covered under darkness. And that man who built his house way up on top of the mountain, the wife, seeing that she no longer had her beautiful home, she no longer had her white cattle, packed her bags, went back to the people and left her husband brokenhearted. But the man that lived down in the valley, he had his nice, comfortable home. He had his herd of black pollies for the milking, and he and his wife were very happy together. So you can see whether it was a curse or a blessing. Patrick was right in both situations, which only goes to the old saying, always listen to the words of a saint at least twice. Thank you very much. Thank you. It's a wonderful collection of stories if you wanted to hear more of them. I tell another one. The very first one is Patrick's arrival at Tara when he first came to Ireland. But it's called St. Patrick Was a Gentleman. And the man's name is Eddie Lenahan. His last name is spelled Lenihan. Google him. He's got also CDs. He does an awful lot of children's. If you're looking for a CD for children or your grandchildren, just it'll take you a little while to, because his accent, it's not that it's that strong. It's just different. It'll take you a little bit to, listening to him before you understand, but you will understand him. And I said one of the great figures in Irish myth and legend, and just absolutely brilliant storyteller. Now, since we're up in that part of the country, okay, where Patrick is very supposedly. I haven't gotten there. I hope to get there this summer. Part of Ireland I don't know well is some of the parts of the north up near Tyrone and Armagh and so forth. But Patrick is supposedly buried. He died he came in 432 and died in 461. And it's said that by the time of his death, almost all of Ireland was converted to Christianity. But he's buried in a place called Down Patrick in the County Down. And there is I'm sure there's a mark, and there's a church probably there in recognition of that. But I think one of the most beautiful love songs of any, not just the Irish, any tradition, comes from that part of the country, County Down, and it's called The Star of the County Down, and I would, I'd like to sing it for you. And I always remember my mom when I sing this song. My mom was just, I always describe her to people, she was a walking party. She was just something else. She lived to be 99 and 6 months in age. And Diane, my wife, says, well, if you count the 9 months in the womb, she made the 100, you know. But anyhow, she always, this is one of the, and she was the one that got me to start sing when I was a kid. She sang herself, but this is one of the songs that she loved. So. Near Banbridge town, in the county down, one morning last July, down a Boreen Green came a sweet colleen, and she smiled as she passed me by. She looked so sweet from her 2 bare feet to the sheen of her nut brown hair. Such a coaxing yell, sure I shook myself, worth to see was I really there. From Bantry Bay up to Derry Quay, and from Galway to Dublin town, no maid I've seen like the brown colleen that I met in the county down. As she onward sped, sure I scratched my head and I looked with a feeling rare. And I says I to a passer-by, who's the maid with the nut brown hair? He smiled at me and he says he, she's the gem of all Erin's crown. Young Rosie McCann from the banks of the Bann, she's the star of the county down. From Bantry Bay up to Derry Quay, and from Galway to Dublin town, no maid I've seen like the brown colleen that I met in the county down. At the harvest fair she'll be surely there, so I'll dress in me Sunday clothes, with me shoes shone right and me hat cocked right, for a smile from me nut brown rose. No pipe I'll smoke, no horse I'll yoke, till my plough is a rust-coloured brown, till a smiling bride by my own fireside sits the star of the county down. From Bantry Bay up to Derry Quay, and from Galway to Dublin town, no maid I've seen like the brown colleen that I met in the county down. Sinead, thank you very much. Thanks. Thanks. Yeah, a wonderful song. It's my, I have a lot of favorites, but that's my favorite. It's just, it's usually sang much faster. I like to sing it as a story. I like to tell it as a story. So, now, and I'm going to ask you to join me in this. There's a wonderful tradition in the Irish going back for many years, and some of these songs you know yourself, and it's a very interesting thing about how words and phrases develop, evolve, change. I was an English teacher for 39 years. And of course, I love language. I love words. That's why I was saying when I hear languages somewhere and I'll stop just to hear it. But I love words and how they come about and how they evolve and change. Now, there's a tradition going back in the old time. For example, when people get together in houses, you know, before electricity came along and so forth, there were people and they were called ramblers. You rambled to other people's houses and people would get together to talk, sing, dance, play music. And there was always a period of the night where they would sing a series of songs together. And somebody would say, "Come all you and sing." It's a long phrase, right? Well, over the years, these songs that were connected with this tradition, the words got shortened into Comalias. So now in the Irish tradition, if somebody says, why don't we do some Comalias, come all yous, but it's been, as I said, condensed into actually one word. So this is a series of Comalias. There's some that are Irish, and I think some there are American. Whenever I sing the songs of George M. Cohan, I think of those songs as also Comalias as well. So a series of Comalias, and I'm sure a lot of you know them or know parts of them. And we'll, as I go along, as you recognize them, please sing along with me. Over in Killarney, many years ago, me mother sang a song to me in tones so sweet and low. Just a simple little ditty in her grand old Irish way. And I'd give the world if I could hear her sing that song today. I'm sure you know. Toora-loora-loora, toora-loora-lie, toora-loora-loora. Hush now, don't you cry. Toora-loora-loora, toora-loora-lie, toora-loora-loora. That's an Irish lullaby. And if you're Irish, come into the parlor. There's a welcome there for you. And if your name is Timothy or Pat, so long as you come from Ireland, there's a welcome on the mat. And if you come from the mountains of Moore and or Killarney's lake so blue, I sing you a song, you're one of us. If you're Irish or you're one of us, if you're Irish, this is the place for you. Oh, my name is McNamara, I'm the leader of the band. Although if you remember, we're the greatest in the land. We play in wakes and weddings and all the fancy ball. And when we play at funerals, we play at McNamara's ball. Diddly-eye, the diddly-eye-dum, diddly-eye, the diddly-um, diddly-eye-um, diddly-um-dum, diddly-um, diddly-um, McNamara's band. And it was merry, merry, plain as any name can be. But with propriety, we'll say Marie. It's a grand old name, and it was Mary, Mary, long before the fashions came. And there is something there that sounds so fair. It's a grand old name. Give my regards to Broadway. Remember me to Herald Square. Tell all the gang on 42nd that I will soon be there. Of how I'm yearning to mingle with the old time crowd. My regards to whole Broadway and say that I'll be there long. over there, over there. Send the word over there. Oh, we'll be over, we're coming over, and we won't come back till it's over there. Well, I'm a Yankee Doodle Dandy, Yankee Doodle do or die, a real live nephew of my Uncle Sam, born on the 4th of July. Well, I've a Yankee Doodle sweetheart, she's my Yankee Doodle joy. Yankee Doodle went to London just to ride a pony. I am that Yankee Doodle boy. Oh, Danny boy, the pipes are calling from glen to glen and down the mountainside. The summer's gone and all the flowers are dying. 'Tis you, must go and I must die. But come ye back when summer's in the meadow, or when the valley's hushed and white with snow. It's I'll be here in sunshine or in shadow. Oh, Danny boy, oh, Danny boy, I love you so. Shanae. And thank you very more power to you for singing along. More power. Yeah.
Jim, this has been amazing. I can't believe that you have any voice left.
Well, Terry, you know what the problem is? I always get scared because I always wonder if I'm going to be able to hit that high note.
You did great. It was
Sometimes I don't, and then all you can do is just
smile.
laugh at yourself, right? Sometimes I'll go into a squeak, but
Well, that was absolutely beautiful. The songs, the story. It was such a lovely evening. I can't thank you enough.
Thank you. I have one song and one little. If you have time, or do you have to get off at a certain amount?
I think we have a very few more minutes before our Zoom cuts off. So
it will cut off. Well, in case it does cut off,
we may have to do it next time you come. I think.
Yeah, in case it does. Again, thank you.
Thank
so
you
very much for having me. Thank you all for coming in, and as I said, hopefully we get the shots. We'll be able to do it live.
Yes.
But if it cuts out, people always ask me about St. Patrick's Day and so forth, and of course, ambivalent feelings. I say a wonderful day to bring attention to the culture, and of course, then there's the other side of it. Some people go out and get absolutely roaring blitz, and then the stereotype is carried on. But anyhow, I just wanted to say, I just wanted to end with a very humorous, it's like there's a whole series of what they call Pat and Mike and Pat and Mary stories in the Irish tradition.
Mhm.
And I wanted to give you this one, and it's told in relation to the drink, and hopefully I'll get through it, and it's yours to pass on to whoever you want. And these stories, Pat and Mike, Pat and Mary, could be anywhere from 9 to 99. In this particular case, Pat has just moved into a new town in Ireland, and people don't know him very much. And Mike is the bartender. So Friday night, Pat comes in and says to Mike, he says, listen, give me 3 pints of Guinness. And Mike says to him, you mean you want me to give you 1 pint, you'll drink it, and then I'll give you the second, you'll drink it, and then third. He says, no. Line 3 pints up here. And of course, all the locals, they don't know him very well. They're all, the ears are open, they're all listening. Takes the 1 pipe, takes a sip out of it, and seems to stop and pray. Takes a sip out of the second, stops and prays, takes the sip out of the third, stops and prays, goes back and forth till he finishes the 3 pints and he walks out of the pub. Well, this is going on for a couple of weeks, and after a while, Mike starts to get to know him and says to him one day, Pat, you know, I have to tell you, people around here are very curious. He said, well, what are they curious about? Well, you come in here every Friday night, you order 3 pints of Guinness, you take a sip out of between each one, and you look like you pray, and everybody's wondering, is there some great significance to this? He says, oh, yes, there is. He says, you see, I have 2 brothers. One is an American, one is an Australian. We made a promise to each other that every Friday night, regardless of where we were, whatever place we were, we would go into a pub, we'd order 3 pints, and we'd sit there and drink them, and we'd sort of meditate about each other as if we were together. Well, everybody in the village, oh God, what a wonderful tradition that, what a wonderful thing to do. So this goes on for about a year, and then one night, Pat comes in and he says to Mike, I'll take only 2 pints tonight. What? I only want 2 tonight. And everybody, of course, again, the years come on, puts down the 2, goes through the same ritual, goes out. It goes on for several weeks. And finally, Mike says to Pat, Pat, everybody is very worried. What are they worried about? He said, well, you've been coming in here for well over a year, drinking 3 pints of Guinness in order in remembrance of your 2 brothers, and now you only order 2. Everybody's like, did something happen to one of your brothers? And he says, oh, God, no. I just decided to give up the drink myself. Of all the money that e'er I spent, I spent it in good company, and of all the harm that e'er I done, at last it was to none but me. And all I've done for want of wit, to memory now I can't recall. So fill to me the parting glass. Good night and joy be with you all. And of all the comrades that e'er I had, they are sorry for my going away. And of all the sweethearts that e'er I had, would wish me one more day to stay. But since it falls unto my lot that I should rise and you should not, I will gently rise and I'll softly call. Good night and joy be with you all. Good night. Well, you are safe. You are in your homes. Jocelyn, thank you so much. Wonderful to see you. Terry, wonderful to meet you, and all you wonderful people that came in. Thank you so very much. And I hope we see each other live in the very near future.
Absolutely.
Take care of
We
yourself.
will see you in person soon. I thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. I thank you. It was an absolute pleasure.
It was lovely.
All right.
Okay.
Take
Good
care
night,
now.
everyone.
Right.
Good night, everybody. Thanks.
Oops. Oh, gosh, this.